Welcome back to the FloTrack podcast. I'm Kevin Sully, and joining me from a literal woodshed, it's Lincoln Shrike. Good morning, Lincoln.
Hey, good morning. Yeah, got a lot of wooden canvases to the outside. I was going to say what direction, but I can't really. I guess it's my left. Sorry. Some things never change. I fumble the intro and then I have to clear my throat. It's always the same. Yeah, you could call it a woodshed. We have a lot of wooden canvases here that are ready to become paintings. So a lot good times to be had in the hype shed.
Mm-hmm. No, it's changed. The name is officially now the Woodshed. I like that better. I think
The
it
woodshed.
fits your persona a little better. Yeah. FloTrackPodcast at gmail.com is the email address. You can find the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, and wherever else you listen, or on FloTrack.org/FloTrackPodcasts. This is going to be the only episode of the week where we talk about something current, unless there's crazy breaking news, because after this, we're going to reflect on the year that was. But we had a marathon yesterday in Arizona, the project to cap off the year. So we're going to talk about some takeaways from that race. Lincoln, we'll get it out of the way right now at the top, though. Both you and I lost to Gordon in the fantasy draft here. I'm a little disappointed. I attribute it to one erroneous pick on my part. What do you blame your loss on?
Yeah, the thing with Gordon was obviously gracious in victory. That's how the way he always reacts to things as such. Listen, on my side, I had Martin Hehir on my team. He won. I had Colin Binney. He got third. I made the mistake of, as any amateur marathon predictor would do, you look at the guys with the fastest PRs, and even if they haven't run fast in a couple of years, you can sometimes get tempted into them. And the top guy, TK, yeah, they didn't even show up. So that was cool. That's what I attribute my mistakes, my issues to. I guess you could look at it as I put a lot of faith also in CJ Albertson, who we'd had in the pod, a little over a week ago. He was never really in it. Maybe it just wasn't his day, or maybe the 209 was a little bit on the treadmill was a little bit fool's gold. But I'm still coming away feeling okay because I did have Martin Hehir on my team. I did have Colin Binney on my squad. So I wasn't completely made to look a fool here. A couple of my guys did, they just didn't make it. They didn't show up. So what can you do?
They missed the bus, quite literally. Yeah. I have, I guess, fewer excuses. Mine was just more of a drafting issue on my part. But yeah, you rode the Syracuse train pretty well there. Your number one pick wasn't your number one guy, or even your number two guy. It ended up being someone you picked. You picked Marty pretty late, didn't you?
I think he was my third or fourth pick. Because I went with Albertson, and then I went with the Eritrean with the fastest PR, who didn't end up racing. I kind of wish he would have reached out, but that's neither here nor there. And I think a lot of people. I think to Martin Hehir made a lot of sense. Not necessarily did I think he was going to run 2:08:59 and run away with this, but you talk about he had a good run at the trials, and he. I forgot to mention, but he mentioned, I think, a post-race tweet, he had to use the bathroom in Atlanta. So he had to come to a complete stop and use the facilities, and still had a good race there. So, you take that out and you get another 10 months of fitness in. He has got a bright future in the marathon, and he went ahead and showed that too. And it just is an incredible thing, considering he is somebody who's in medical school full-time and is doing clinicals in the ICU during this peak of this horrific COVID pandemic. It's quite the story. But yeah, what a future he has in the marathon. I'm kind of excited to see what he can do next.
Yeah. Okay, we'll get to him and the other takeaways of the men's race in a little bit. Let's start, though, with the women. I jotted down some takeaways, but I'm curious, what was the main thing that you learned on Sunday in the women's race?
Well, as far as this group, separate from Des Linden, separate from, I guess you could say, the three who made the Olympic team, and maybe you put Molly Huddle and Emily Sisson, although they've been, so far inconsistent in the marathon. Sarah Hall's in a class of her own right now. You could, it's difficult because when you could easily say right now, if she had finished in the top 3 in Atlanta, I think unquestionably you'd be like, she's the best marathoner in the country right now. There's no question. I think that's still the case because when she is at her best, she is absolutely the best in the country. She becomes the second fastest in U.S. history behind Dina Castor. Went for the record, was on pace at halfway. So, she's running very, very confidently. My takeaway is not that I want to overhaul the U.S. system. The trials format works. It's a bummer that she didn't finish, but you just kind of, you are a little disappointed that we don't get to see her on an Olympic stage. That's the format and that's what you have to deal with. But it's just frustrating that somebody who's running so confidently, who can recover so well, who can get second in London and come back and run 2:20:32 here. It's a bummer that she's not going to be at the Olympics. I don't want to waste too much time on that because we've known for 10 months that that's not going to be the case. But it's further emphasizing, it's like, man, we are missing out on a real chance to medal here with Sarah Hall, the way she's running when she's running well, because, clearly this was a good women's field. Now, it maybe didn't live up to the hype. Not as many women ran fast on this level of maybe what the men did, but she is, from the beginning, was on a different level. I mean, put Kellen Taylor in the blender early and cost Kellen Taylor probably a place in several minutes from her time, just by going out so hard. Sarah Hall is running incredibly right now, and it's just a shame she's not going to be at the Olympics.
Yeah, I don't want to spend a lot of time on the Olympics, not Olympics thing. I think we've covered that ground before. I don't think we need to rerun the trials. The trials were in Atlanta in February. Everybody agreed on the start time and end time. If it wasn't for a once in every 100 years event, we would have had the Olympics before Sarah Hall ran these last couple marathons. So you never would have even known that that's what she was going to do. And I mean, she clearly thrives in the time trial setting, because if you look at those results, they're otherworldly. And then you look at New York and Boston, and she hasn't had or the Olympic trials, she hasn't had a great race yet there.
Yeah.
But that doesn't take away from what she did on Sunday, which was mighty impressive. 2:20:32 and running very aggressively, although running smart too. She didn't go out over her head. She went out under 70 minutes, but didn't slow down that much. My main takeaway from this is this racing frequently thing. It works for her. It's not a gimmick. It clearly is effective, because you look over her last, her 2020, obviously there was a space there because of the pandemic, but outside of the trials, she's been running really well. I mean, in August, she runs 68 minutes and a half. Then October, she runs 2:22. And then December, she runs 2:20. And those were only, 10 weeks apart from October, November to December. A little less, actually, I think. So, I mean, the racing frequently thing works. I'm curious if she's paving the way for more people to do it. Not in the Yuki Kawauchi manner, because Yuki would have done 6-7 marathons. And as CJ Albertson brought up, sometimes Yuki's running those as training runs. He enters, he knocks out a 2:19, does some strides, and that's Sunday, then uploads to Strava, and he's all good. But Sarah Hall's going for it in all these races. And it's not just marathons. She's throwing in 25Ks and half marathons and 10 miles, and all this stuff is in there. So she seems to have found the form. The thing that's too bad for her situation is, with the spring marathons all canceled, it's going to be a whole nother year before we get to see her really get after it, unless there's some sort of second tier marathon or non-major marathon that she can get into in the spring, maybe to chase the record again. But I know people say we don't like to chase times. We're about, out there going for places. I think the number one goal for her now, though, is that American record, because she's shown that she can get pretty close. And if there's no major marathon and no Olympic team to contend for in the first half of next year, why not give that a shot?
Yeah. I mean, it's awfully quick. Is Dubai canceled in January? Are they not doing that?
I'm not sure. I know she's running the rack half, so she's probably going to go for, I would guess, the American record there in the half marathon in Saudi Arabia in the first part of the year. It makes sense for her to chase these marks.
Yeah.
And that's cool.
Yeah. And I think, there's several things that make her unique. One, I mean, she is 37, so she's clearly on probably the last half decade of her career. Maybe she'll keep going well into her mid 40s, but she's racing frequently, probably as frequently as she does. Maybe doesn't make sense for a younger athlete with a lot of years left to go. Also for her, I don't think this can be overstated. I think the carbon fiber shoes, I don't want to put too much time in this. I know a lot of people will roll their eyes at saying, they'll either say, well, the shoes are clearly benefiting her more than others, or they'll say the opposite end of the spectrum. Oh, they're just shoes. Everybody has wearing them. But it seems like a lot of people say the recovery is quicker off these shoes. And maybe that's really especially so for her. I do think it's a mindset type of a thing as well. Like we've got it so ingrained that marathoners, you run 2 a year. You have to have a full, a 2 weeks off afterwards, and then a 12-week buildup. For a lot of people, if you're not injured, I think that's probably too cautious, right? And that's if you're eager and impatient and you want to race more, and you see these opportunities go by, and you're not worried about the risk factor of it. She's not going to be worried as much at this point in her career of, maybe I'll pick up an injury here or there, or maybe I won't be fully peaked at that. Well, she's not going to worry about this, especially during this season, of which, kind of the stakes are much lower simply because it's been a pandemic and you don't know where everyone's at physically. Well, she's going to take advantage of that by just showing up at every opportunity. And you don't want to say this situation has been beneficial for her, but it is kind of a year for her to thrive when there's so much uncertainty elsewhere. She'll just show up and say, well, I'm the best, maybe one of the best in the world at frequently racing marathons. And yeah, that's showing. And she's fitter than she's ever been too, which is nuts. But good on her for continuing to do this. We could use a male equivalent on the U.S. side. I mean, this would be like, I don't know if you could say Galen Rupp, but it'd be like somewhat if like Rupp was just like, I race every 2 months in a marathon. Like that would be awesome. We're not going to expect that because he's that's never been his plan. But it's my biggest takeaway is just how much fun this is that somebody's willing to do this, and also that it's possible. And that maybe not every pitcher can go out and throw 120 pitches game in, game out, and be okay and still have an arm left at the end of the season. But she's one of those. She's the workhorse that can handle it. And it is possible, and not everybody has to do the 2 marathons a year and two half marathons. That's it for a marathoner. That she's bucking that trend entirely, and it's cool to see.
It makes sense that it's not the same way for every person.
Exactly.
Because human bodies are all different, and you see it in shorter distances on the track. Everybody takes a different approach to how they race. Usain Bolt didn't race as much as LaShawn Merritt raced. Safan Hassan has different racing tendencies than Shelby Houlihan. But you're right. There was this groupthink, I think, in the marathon. Everybody was in lockstep of how to do it, and she and some other people have done it too. It's not like she's the first person to do it, but they've gotten into this more freewheeling aspect, which I think is pretty cool. Another person who sort of has that a little bit of that vibe, or at least has just been running really well in 2020, the runner-up Kira D'Amato, who ran 2:22:56. I don't know what else to say about her. We've talked about her so much this year just because she's been racing so frequently, be it when she ran that 15:04 5K time trial in the beginning of the year, all the way through until now. She set massive PRs at everything she did. The only thing she didn't get to do was run that Fest 10,000 at the track meet a couple weeks ago because she had food poisoning, which I think would have been probably the most interesting result, Lincoln, because that would have been in an event where she could have actually made the Olympic team. This 222, I think if they reran the trials next year, we'd say D'Amato can 100% make the team, but they're not rerunning the marathon trials next year. They're running the 10K and the 5K. So we didn't get that one result from her, but my goodness, across the board, she's just had a unbelievable, unfathomable 2020.
Yeah. I mean, I think the remarkable thing is she's obviously proved herself to be one of the best distance runners in the U.S., but she kind of continues to exceed expectations, running 220. What'd she run yesterday? 222. Look at the exact time. Yeah, 222.50. She ran smart too. This wasn't a case of somebody, you would have thought, okay, now everyone kind of understands what Chiara D'Amato is all about. Maybe she's really going to go for this and either hit or really, really miss. But she ran very, very intelligently and was rewarded with a really good time. The marathon is it was just about getting a big PB for her, and obviously improving her fitness. But the 10,000, we continue to get example after example. I mean, she's a real contender to be an Olympian. It's an incredible story, just where she's come from and where she's at now, just to be an afterthought to somebody who's a real contender, somebody who hasn't ever been a factor at an, I guess you got 15th of the trials in the marathon, but that's not really a factor. You just don't get these coming out of nowhere stories, particularly for someone who's 36. That just doesn't happen. But she is continuing to reinforce that she is legitimate with each race. And it's going to be fun to watch her this upcoming summer in the 10,000, because like we said, with every performance, it's more and more proof like that. I mean, not that you really can fluke a good time in a distance race, but there were some elements early on where you're like, you could kind of explain it away. It's like, well, it was a good 5,000. There was no pressure. And then she won that like 10,000 that wasn't very fast in the summer. It's like, I mean, that was probably hot. And sorry if I broke up there.
Yeah, no, I'm sure the last point was amazing.
It was excellent.
One other thing I want. Yeah, and that's the secret to running. One other thing I want to touch on, just the third and fourth place finishers in this race before we move on to the men's race. Kellen Taylor, 225.22. Emma Bates, 225.40. They got there from different directions, though. As you mentioned, Taylor went out with Hall under 70 minutes, whereas Bates was with D'Amato and Steph Bruce in that second group. Bruce ended up dropping out. So Bates kind of closed on Kellen Taylor, the back half. I guess it just shows you how fast going out, how hard it is to go out sub 70, because Taylor had a big time positive split on the back end there. But, the top four that we expected, I thought Bruce would be in there as well. But when you have a time trial like setup, this is what you get. You don't get Olympic trials type results where it's, whoa, that's a huge shocker. You got the people you thought were going to be there, save for one exception.
Props to Kellen Taylor for going for it. And I understand she came home in like 5 minutes slower in the second half, but that's a painful way to really test yourself. And, like we mentioned, in the US, there are not that many opportunities to run like this. There's no regular race on the circuit that's like a Dubai, that's like a Berlin in the US. Chicago's pretty fast, but it's not a situation like this where it's clearly the whole design is just to run as fast as possible, and you don't get all these Americans coming up, running the same time. And she just said, I'm just going to go for it, and pain be damned, and if I blow up, I blow up. And she did blow up a little bit, but third is still a good day from her. And she's another person that can make the 10,000 team. So this is just another workout for her trying to get set for the trials in the 10,000. So it was good. But part of the part of the thing that made the women's race disappointing was that it was just the Sara Hall show pretty much the whole time. So at least Kellen Taylor tried to go for it, tried to make it a race instead of just settling and saying, whatever, Sarah Hall's on a different level. No, she tried to go for it and she blew up, but not catastrophically so.
Yeah. Well, I thought heading into this thing, I thought it was going to be more competitive, but that's because I didn't think somebody was going to run 220. I thought the winning time would be 221 high or 222 low,
really?
and then we'd have
You didn't think
a
Hall would run this
race.
fast?
Not until she started talking about it. Then once she started talking about it, I thought, okay, but a month ago, did I think the American record was under threat? No. 2 weeks ago, did I think the American record was under threat? No. I mean, she ran, I guess we should have thought that because she runs 222 in London and did a lot of that by herself in not very good weather. So then you come back and you have an even better course, better weather, and you think, okay, maybe she can do it. But also there's the turnaround thing. And I'm still ingrained in those old school ways of thinking, like you said, of 2 marathons a year. So I think, if someone's running another marathon 10 weeks later, there's no guarantee it's going to be better. In fact, there's a good chance it's going to be worse. But Sarah Hall has changed my thinking on that. So I guess I should have thought that. But that's why I thought it would be more bunched up together. I didn't think Sarah Hall would win by this much.
Yeah. Yeah, we shouldn't take for granted, though, what she's able to do. Because look what happened with Jared Ward. Jared Ward also ran London, and that was on a short buildup. And then he comes back and runs this, and he blows up over the second half. It's remarkable what she's able to do in recovery, and just the mental approach too. It's tough, I think, to run that many races and to get up for a London and then try to come back for this. And it's remarkable that she can do this. Because like I said, Jared Ward was disastrous over the second half, and you have to consider that was a product of him running 2 marathons within 2 months. Most people can't do it. Yeah,
well, and the first one with Jared was on a really short notice. He didn't know about it, remember? Mm-hmm. And he said, okay, I'm just going to do it because, heck, this is a great opportunity. I'm just going to go for it. It just goes to show that everybody has a different system. Jared Ward probably fits better into the 2 marathons a year, the half marathon prep race before that traditional bread and butter setup, because this 2020, I mean, even if you go back to the trials, which I know he had a big build up there too, but 2020 was not good for him. He got that win over Jake Riley in the virtual 5K, which I thought would catapult him to something well below 210. But yeah, he needs that. It seems like he needs that. And he's a science-minded guy, so I'm sure he'll crunch the numbers and go back and figure out what went wrong. But just from the outside, it looks like, hey, that's a guy who on short notice, change of plans, 2 races cramped together, that's not working to his advantage. He's the guy who 8-9 months out circles a date on a calendar and does everything to prep for that race. I have 3 other takeaways from the men's race. You can tell me what you think of them. All right. And you can weigh in on each one of these because I want to know your thoughts. My first takeaway, Martin Hehir might be a dude. What do you think? Might be a guy.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know what the definition here of a dude is, but if it's someone we have to take seriously in the marathon for the years to come, I think that's very evident.
Actually it, yeah.
That's the definition.
Yeah.
He's young enough. He's young enough now. It just turned 28 to say, with the next trials coming up in less than 3 years, if he stays healthy and, if he takes some of the focus off that dang medical career, what is he doing? Wasting his time with that. No, I'm just kidding. No, running 2:08:59 and the confident breakaway. I know Drawdy kind of came back on him a little bit, but the confidence to break away at whatever it was, 3 or 4 miles to go was impressive. I think I heard Des Linden say, on the broadcast, like, you have to learn how to win. And he had never won a marathon before, but he kind of seems to have that knack to just say, whatever, I'm just going to go for it. And he said in the interview, it never really was, it got hard, but it was never like, he never was in over his head. It was difficult. A skeptic, a cynic would say, oh, okay. I mean, do this 7-8 years ago. How fast would Ritz would have run? How fast would Abdi or Meb would have run on a situation like this? Obviously, we know this was the first time for anything like this. And yeah, they probably would have run as fast or faster, but that shouldn't take away that Hehir has figured out this distance in 3 races. And he, you could make the argument that you could certainly make the argument that he's the second best U.S. marathoner right now. I know he didn't make the Olympic team, but that position is up for grabs, certainly. And now he's run, of active guys, he's run the second fastest time. And based on where, he was a very good college runner. He's got the pedigree. I could listen to that case. I'm not ready to say it myself yet, but I could listen to the case that he's the second best guy in the country right now after only 3 marathons. So yes, that makes him absolutely a dude, as you defined it.
Yeah, I boil it down to 3 facts. One, he broke 209, which we know is incredibly rare for an American to do. 2, the confidence with which he moved away at 35K was impressive. Leads me to believe he could go even quicker. And 3, he's done this twice now. He overperformed at the trials, and then now he's run well in a time trial setup and beaten a lot of established names in the sport. That leads me to believe that he's a guy. It's not just a one race wonder. And then you go and you look back and you think, well, how did he do this? And you look, well, yeah, he was good at Syracuse. He was an All-American. He was 7th in the trials in the 10,000 in 2016. He's non-traditional in the sense of he's in med school right now, and it's been a circuitous path to the marathon, but it all adds up and makes a ton of sense here. This course, you're right, tailor-made to be fast. Historically, would it have measured up if other people had the same opportunity? Doesn't matter because he's not racing against Ritz or Meb. I mean, he's still racing against Abdi because he's going to race against Abdi until the sun crashes into the earth at some point. He can only race the guys he's racing against. So I think he 100% is. I thought that the trials were not his debut. The trials was his debut.
I said that last week on the podcast. He had run a 2:13 at some point, either 2018 or 2019. So he started with the 2. He started with the 2:13. And then went to 2:11, and then
Sacramento.
So I mean, 3 for 3, good marathons.
Yeah. Well, that brings me to my next takeaway, and you touched on it a little bit there, which is that the rest of the American men's top 3 is wide open, because you could make an argument now for Hehir to be in that top 3. You saw what happened with Ward, although you could chalk 2020 up as a mulligan, but he certainly didn't separate himself from everybody else. Fauble, the other guy we thought who would be on the Olympic team, he had a good race, but finished 4th. So, 3 guys beat him. And then you have guys like Drotti, who go 2:09.09, which is a big performance. Colin Benny, the other former Syracuse runner, 2:09.38. And then you have Ian Butler out of nowhere, 2:09.45. Scott Smith, 2:09.46. Mick Iacofano, 2:09.55. Not necessarily the NCAA Hall of Fame there checking in. So I have no idea. If they reran the trials next year, I guess I'd be inclined to just say it's going to be Abdi and Jake Riley and Rupp again, because I don't have any clue who would finish in the top 3. And then if you ask me about 2024, when some of these guys are going to age out and there's another group that's coming in, there's just so many question marks here, Lincoln.
Yeah, Rupp's the only constant. It does seem like Hehir has staying power. It's difficult because it's so impressive what he's able to do. I have 2 kids, and I feel like it's the hardest job in the world. And he's also going to medical school, and he's also running 120-mile weeks. And I'm a little short of that 120-mile week range, and I haven't been in a hospital in several months, thank God. So it's awfully impressive. And when somebody's doing it like that, you feel like, well, what's racing? That's just something that's the easy part for him. And we've done this too before, where one good marathon, I think back to whatever year it was with Ritz when he ran his 2:07 in Chicago, and it's like, he's figured the distance out. Here comes Ritz, and obviously injuries get in the way, and you're bound to have a bad marathon. So obviously the jury's still out on everyone in the men's side besides Galen Rupp, because Rupp's accomplished things. And then still for Martin Hehir, the next race will be high stakes, because if he has a bad one, it'll be like, well, see, the marathon's tough. He knew he was bound to get bit, or we'll be anointing him as this next great thing. It's it's definitely a what have you done for me lately type of a thing. But if you choose not to look at it simply through the prism, which I'm always tempted to do, of what does this mean for his Olympic prospects, just
Mm-hmm.
running 208 is obviously a tremendous big deal. And he's established himself as one of the best marathoners in US history through 3 races. So,
Yeah, but what about the rest of the field? I'm curious about the rest
yeah.
of the field because we had the deepest U.S. race in history here. We had
Yeah.
7
Yeah.
guys
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
under 210, and you can chalk that up to a lot of things. But who else, other than Hehir, is
Okay.
going to be in the mix in the coming years? That's what I'm
Oh,
asking.
it's tough to say. Maybe 2 of them, maybe none of them. I mean, I tend to think Fauble because he's proven it. Girardi was a 209.09 to get second is massively impressive. Can I say he's going to be a factor going forward? I mean, I can't affirm it. I can't say that without a doubt.
Mm-hmm.
You put this race at any point in the last decade in the US, and you're going to have this level of performance. It's not like this crop of guys is suddenly better than what we've seen. This was a product of the race we just had that's on a flat course that we never see in the US, where everybody's running in the same type of thing. I mean, first off, let's get it out of the way. Galen Rupp could have run 204 on this course, if he had the Pacers. So there's not this isn't a big push where a bunch of guys are suddenly, oh, they're creeping closer. That's not it at all. That's not. This was an easy course, and a lot of guys ran fast on an easy course. And it's good to see that we can get a bunch of guys under 210. That's encouraging, but this doesn't change the way I think of the American men en masse. Like
Mm-hmm.
this was the rare opportunity that when you run this like on a track, this is what you're going to get. One of these guys is bound to be a little bit of a breakout star, whether that continues to be Fauble or if it's
Mm-hmm.
Draughty or if it's Benny. I don't know yet. It's tough to tell. But
Yeah,
this
I get what
wasn't
you're saying.
some revelation of a day that's like, oh my gosh, this is we're so much better than I realized. Because I don't think a guy like Ian Butler is as all of a sudden a superstar. No offense to him. I mean, it's not really how it works. This was a course on the level of a Dubai or a Berlin where the East
Mm-hmm.
Africans run 202. This is still
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
7 minutes slower than that. Let's not try to jump up too much here. This was a big day for Martin Hehir because the way, not necessarily just the time, but the way he ran away from this field. But for the rest of the guys, it's a great moment. I would say most of them will never run faster in their lives, though.
Wow, that was a Gordon level heat there. That was Gordon
Would you
level
do you
without the
think a lot of these guys are going
without
to
the
run faster? This was a once.
without
I mean, maybe they
without the Sixers digression. No, I listen. I told you. I texted you yesterday. I said I don't think my opinion of American marathoning changed from before the day to after the day. The all-time lists have been changed, altered, thrown out. Right? There's so many,
done.
so many top 10, top 20 performances. But yeah, relative to the rest of the world, I don't think it was a big shift. What would have convinced me more that okay, the U.S. has come to play, as opposed to 7 guys breaking 210. If maybe 2 guys broke 208 or 3
Yeah.
guys broke 208, and the guys that broke it maybe were the guys we were more familiar with, so we'd put more stock in them moving forward. If Jared Ward ran 207.03, you'd be like, oh, that's a big time run, right? He ran faster than Ritz ever did. Or if someone had a high 206 or something, but we didn't see that. We saw this big movement of depth, which makes me think you're right that it was a product of just the circumstances of the race. However, I think there is something psychological to times. That's often the case. Marty Hehir is now a 208 high marathoner. It's going to impact his mentality going into the next race, and this is how you see the times drop. But my other takeaway, my big takeaway was Galen Rupp could be the best American men's marathoner if he wanted to for the next 10 years. Because I don't see anybody closing the gap. There's him,
No.
there's half a mile, and then there's this next group fighting for what's next. I agree he would have gone incredibly quick on this course depending on how many pacers he had and how far they could go. I don't think 204 is outside the realm of possibilities. I'd probably go safe and put the line at like 205.30 or something like that as the over-under. But I just thought, hey, if Galen Rupp was watching this at home and was thinking about his prospects of being the best American at whatever marathon he decides to run, he was like, okay, I'm good.
Yeah.
Marty Hehir, 208.59. Cool. I'll see you. I'll see you in Chicago. I'll see you at the trials in 2024, whenever. I don't think he was fazed in the least by any of this. I think what would have spooked him would have been if some 23-year-old fresh out of college did something big, or if a couple guys, right, known guys, jumped in there. Like if Leonard Career was in this race and Leonard Career ran 206. But just that mass that's still at that 209 spot. Yes, that's the better than the mass being at 210 or 211, which is where we've seen it in the past. But that's not enough to dislodge Rupp. Not even close.
No, of course. And I think we could have all predicted that. I mean, obviously that would have been an extraordinary moment.
I believed.
You believed.
I thought we were going to see something fast.
No, I think I think Galen Rupp was comfortable probably turning this off at halfway when he saw it was at 64 or something. He's like, it's not that big of a deal. There was also a fundamental decision in this race, I think, with the way the pacing was, that the goal was to get a ton of guys running under 210. If they would have said, hey, if they wanted the race to look more like the women's race, and maybe Martin Hehir wouldn't have gone with this, and maybe several other guys wouldn't have, maybe we could have seen a 207. Like maybe we always do this, and it can be a fool's errand. But if they say, hey, by the way, there will be a pace group that's on 208, like 208 flat pace, maybe we could have had a 207, right? Two guys, maybe Drawdy and Hehir would have felt good enough to go with that pace, and we would have come away with more. As it was, though, clearly the mission of this was, let's get a bunch of guys under 210. That's why you saw a first half that was fine, but not anything spectacular. You worried there for a second. It's like, oh my gosh, they're going to fall backwards and nobody's going to break 210. Like, obviously that didn't happen, but some of this was the product of, I think, very cautious, very designed to, let's have as many guys under 210. If that you rerun this and you kind of get a better idea of what fitness people are in, I think you could have seen faster times. This was very much like, what does the reputation of this race want to be? It wants to be like a site where a bunch of guys join the top 10 list. That's not going to be anything you're going to tell your grandkids about, but it's nice to see a bunch of these American guys now with respectable PRs.
Well, yeah, and it's noteworthy that you had Valencia, which was basically the Kenyan and Ethiopian and the European equivalent to this, where you could almost say 204 became 202 or 205 became 203. However you want to splice it, it's fine with you. And then this race, 211 became 209 or 212 became 210. You saw that same thing, but you're keeping up with the Joneses here, basically. Like that, you're still a little bit behind. I think we're all also biased by the fact that, who are the three best marathoners for the U.S. in the current era? Or four: Ryan Hall, Rupp, Meb, and Ritz. Correct? I think we'd all agree on that for the men.
Yeah.
Right. All of them were absolute stars in college.
Yeah.
Right. All of them went to college and were multiple-time All-Americans and took home titles, won NCAA championships. So I think when we're looking for the next person, we're looking for the person who's, winning NCAA titles and then going to the marathon. And in Hall's case, it was at a very early age that he did it. So you'd say, well, Grant Fisher, why isn't he in the marathon? Like, that's the person you're looking at as someone who can be the 206 person, even the 205 person. And the stories of the people who were mid-pack collegiate runners are awesome, right? But we haven't seen that yet translate into, on the men's side, into being in that top tier, right? Meb, NCAA champion. Hall, NCAA champion. Ritz, NCAA champion. Rupp, NCAA champion. They were clearly on another level, and then they decided to become marathoners.
Yeah. I mean, I do think that's why you're encouraged also by Marty Hehir, because no, he wasn't an NCAA champion, but he was, he wasn't a mid-pack guy. He was a big part.
Right.
I think he was their number 2 or number 3 guy on their championship team in 2015. He was a sub 4 miler. I think had run low 1330s in the 5. No, that's not Galen Rupp or any of those other guys you mentioned. But he was good enough in college where you're like, well, there's some speed there that he's going to be able to capitalize on and maybe be a factor when he really gets into his gets into his groove as a professional marathoner, that maybe he's somebody that can finish top 3 at a major one day. Not now, but maybe at some point. And so that's why you're most encouraged. I don't want to take, I mean, there are the random Nick Simmons in, situations where you get a D3 guy that comes into a star. So I don't want to just say because Noah Girardi was a D3 guy that he can't be a star, but you're right. The guys who have historically been there are the guys who are awesome on the track and in college and cross country as well. So yeah, I mean, for that, then we're waiting on, we're waiting on Eric Jenkins to become a marathoner, which I don't know when that will be. We're waiting on, even though he didn't win a title, but he's clearly going to be a marathoner, Tyler Day, who ran 13:16 indoors. It kind of feels like we're always waiting for these guys, but you have to remember that two things. I mean, a career as prolonged and as successful as Rupp is rare. And then with like a Ryan Hall, going to the marathon that early is also rare. So
right.
You end up most frequently with these guys, these second tier guys that have no other choice but to go to the marathon. And then you kind of hope one of them pans out. And one of them may be panning out right now in Hehir. But yeah, you're right. The limitations are clearly by the fact that most people in the U.S. do not go to the marathon until they're completely washed out of the track.
Yeah, well, and you just look at 10K PBs and you say, okay, in order to run a 2:07 marathon, what does your 10K PB need to be? What does your 5K PB need to be? Obviously, that's not the end all be all. Those are not destiny, but that gives you a pretty good indication of a range of possible outcomes. And can you rise to the level of being a really good marathoner in the United States? Yeah, absolutely. We've seen that time and time again. I remember Brian Sell was somebody who made an Olympic team who had a very modest high school career. But when you're talking about times that are going to contend for major marathon victories, and you see what is happening Kenya and Ethiopia, it's a different ballgame. Now, I will say this though: the U.S. running and getting a whole bunch of 209s. I mean, it definitely whatever. We didn't make up any ground. The United States didn't make up any ground on Kenya and Ethiopia, but in terms of the race for who the third or fourth best is, I think the United States is right in there with a bunch of other countries, and it certainly helps to have that depth. I know that's not really encouraging when you go to major marathons and Ethiopia and Kenya swamp the top 10, but it's just something to keep in mind. If you take out those two, if you take out the Lakers and the Clippers, Lincoln, the Spurs probably can make the Western Conference playoffs, but if you remove them from the equation, getting guys in 209, 208 is a good result.
Yeah, I mean, if we're waiting for the days where we're just all of a sudden going to have America on the same level as Ethiopia and Kenya in the marathon, you're going to be waiting a lifetime and more. It's just like when is the U.S. men's national team in soccer? When are we going to be as good as Brazil, Russia, and Russia. Spain? You're going to be. I don't know.
Russia. I'm taking us over
Germany.
Russia.
Sorry, I meant Germany. Germany.
There you go.
Brazil, Germany, and Spain. Sorry. You're going to be waiting forever. Right. That's just not. You can't make the comparison for whatever reason. You talk about development at the youth level. You talk about going to the marathon earlier. Being at altitude, this, that, and whatever. It's just not going to happen. But we can kind of look at the bubble within U.S. running and say these guys have the possibility to continue to progress, and maybe one day they end up running 2:06 and being one of the best in U.S. history, and that's good enough. That's something to be excited about. And Jared Ward's not. No offense, but he's not a superstar, and he got 6th at the Olympics. Is that too much of an ask for somebody like Martin Hehir down the road? No, absolutely not. So
Right.
There's plenty to get excited about just on the fact that oh no, no one's coming up on Galen Rupp's shoulders. Well, we didn't expect that, but that may never happen in U.S. history. But there was some things to be encouraged here. There were some things to still be like, you're trying to make me get excited about 7 guys running 209 or whatever it was. It's not always easy to do, but overall, I just look at what Hehir did, and that kind of, keeps me going. I'm excited for him.
You're a U.S. marathon fan. I like it. I like that
Super
about you.
fan.
Okay.
Yeah.
So now you're ready to talk about the shoes? I just want to see your face.
Yeah.
Two other things I want to touch on, though. Noah Dratti's finish, where he vomited just a couple steps across the line, was amazing. And I wanted to give a tip of cap to him.
Yeah, it looked like he had been fueling with like Surge. You remember that like biohazard fuel that we used to drink in the 90s. Yeah, right across the line. I think I saw Rory Linkletter also, went to the puke right over. But no, it's I live for that. I love that I love the puke right across the line. It's just you're able to hang in there. You're kicking down for the win, and then you take a step across, and it's just like body release. There's something. I don't know why it probably because it's not like actual food. It's just like gels and liquid, but there's something that it's not gross to me. I just enjoy it. I'm just like, yes, that guy put it all out there and now somebody else has to clean that up. That's just, I don't know. It excites me for whatever reason.
And in a marathon, it can go either direction. So when it comes out that way, you're like, okay, that's not that bad.
Yeah.
But you don't see it that much. That's a lot more common, I feel like, in the 5 or the mile or something, where someone just gets across the line and then immediately starts puking. In a marathon, the control to be able to hold that, because that means that was right there for what, the last
probably
20 minutes, 10 minutes,
yeah,
something like that. It's a long time to have it right there, and he just let it go. Man.
Might have been burping up goo, for the last 20 minutes. It's interesting. It fits him. It fits his aesthetic pretty well. The long hair, the mustache. It's kind of a rock star finish. That said, you're probably never going to see Eliud Kipchoge vomit across the line. Some people are just able to hide it a little bit better. But
I like this though. I prefer
this. It. Yeah, he obviously gave it his all, right? He was dealing with indigestion and just the pain of running, a 2+ minute PR for a long time. It was cool. We'll remember it for a while for sure.
Exactly. Everybody has the fist pump across the finish line photo. His is much more iconic. And if anybody asks him, hey, did you have any regrets about your race? Do you wish you got first? And you're like, of course I wish I got first. But look at this photo. I literally did everything I could. I vomited as soon as I stepped across the line. I mean, it's just an epic finish. I think it's great.
It was cool.
As someone who threw up a couple times, I was not a every race puker, but I puked several times during my running career, and I always felt really satisfied with those races. Like those were the ones where I was like, okay, well, that was it. That was all I could do.
Everything I could.
Yeah.
Yeah. I imagine getting rid of that, crossing the finish line with a massive PB felt pretty good. Like there's some, a lot of people say, oh, you'll feel better if you throw up. Well, this was definitely a lot of, nothing like a PB vomit.
Yeah. The other thing I wanted to add to this is because, you and I have done commentary before. We know that game a little bit. You've commentated a marathon before. I've never commentated a marathon before, but there's a lot of criticism that goes along with it. And I just want to give a tip of the cap. I thought Des Linden was really good in her role as a commentator. And I say that not that I'm surprised, because the couple occasions I've had to interview Linden, she's always great and very introspective. But that's a tough job, and it's really tough the first time you do it, and they were probably doing it remotely. So I just wanted to say I was impressed by how well she did.
Yeah. Yeah. And it can sound patronizing. I'm not that you're intending it, but it can come off patronizing when you're like, wow, a multiple time Olympian, someone who's run dozens of marathons, or not dozens, she's run over 10 marathons, is good at commentating marathons. But no, I mean, look back in the NBA, Magic Johnson, a horrific commentator. There's been other guys, people who are good at in the field of play, bad when a microphone gets in the face. And no, she was the opposite, giving you a real good indication of, I think it's cool to listen to her in the latter miles talk about like, oh, what are they feeling? It's like, oh, they're hurting, but it's a comfortable hurt, and it's, and talking about what it's like to be new to the marathon and to the racing aspect of it with where Andrade was, and she wasn't saying it's over. There was no extraordinary things, but she made it really, really interesting, I thought, to listen to. So I would agree with that wholeheartedly.
Yeah, I like it when they treat the audience like they know what they are tuned in for. Because listen, this was the Marathon Project in December. You weren't stumbling across this on your dial. You're in it because you really know marathoning, or at least are very interested in it. So I like it when they do it like other major sports. They're not explaining the intricacies of a touchdown is 7 points here, Lincoln. They don't do that in football, or 6 in the extra points. This is why I couldn't commentate football. I screwed that up. But they assume a general baseline of knowledge, and I thought she did that, and she worked off of it. And also, she was funny when she said, "My favorite thing to do is run, and my second favorite thing to do is talk about people behind their back." So this was a perfect job for me. Yeah. That's a good line.
That's nice. It's you feel like she's telling the truth there. That's not probably my second favorite thing to do as well. Maybe my first favorite thing to do, because me and running, we're kind of on the outs right now. So, and I think also it was addition by subtraction in the sense there wasn't the discussions the whole time about the shoes. So that was a pleasant situation. It made it more about the athletic performance. And I understand that Marty Hehir was wearing the new Adidas shoes, and other athletes would have been wearing Nikes and this, that, and the other. But, Sarah Hall was in Asics. Andrade was in Saucony shoes. The nature is healing at this point, right? We don't have to make everything about one pair of shoes or two pair of shoes.
I didn't hear any shoe takes after. Did I just look at the wrong websites? I did not hear any.
No. But I think you certainly could have applied the fact that so many guys broke 210 to some of the shoes, right? I mean that, no.
But why are we not? Are we not talking about it because it's all spread out now amongst the different brands?
Okay. I don't know. That's a good question. Or the shoes are now all equal, or it wasn't a 4 guys didn't break 58 minutes in the half marathon. I'm not sure. I think you can certainly say that some of the product of so many guys running that fast was, there's some benefits to the shoes. Maybe these guys that we never heard of would never have broken 210 without it. But, Eliud Kipchoge wouldn't have broken 2 hours if not for the shoes as well, So I've never had a problem with it, So I think the times that they're comparable to previous eras, No, you come off looking like an idiot if you are blowing up on Twitter about however many guys it was breaking 210. This is ruining the sport. I mean, that would be a dumb thing. So I think that's probably why, but I certainly think they played a part. But you know what? The materials on a basketball jersey being more comfortable than they were in 1960 also play a part in the basketball being better. So I've never had a problem with it, but I expected there to be minimal to no conversation in the broadcast about it. And that was the way it was. And that's good. I think we can see that there's no magic. There's no longer going to be anybody in Nike shoes. I think this has been disproven. And it wasn't all that long ago where we were worried at the trials why the fact that Nike is handing out the Alpha Flies. Are we just going to see all the people wearing Alpha Flies not miles ahead, but finishing 1 through 10 and then everybody else trailing behind? Well, that's been disproven. The technology and other brands has been proven to be close, if not as good. And we can kind of rest knowing that one brand is not ruining the sport. And I think even within this small window of 10 months, because think of the hysteria back at Atlanta. Before the race, there was some serious concern. There was a secret
investigative reporting. You did literal investigative reporting.
Exactly. And now that's shifted to where it's like, we don't have to talk about what Nike's doing. You know, we don't. It's good to see.
It seems like, and I was not as focused on their shoes this race, I'll admit it, and maybe that's because Sarah Hall wasn't wearing them, and the camera was on her a lot of the time. Sarah Hall wasn't wearing.
Well, she was in carbon, though. I mean, she's in carbon.
No. I'm saying Alpha Flies. I'm saying it seemed like fewer people. Seemed like fewer people are wearing Alpha Flies. They're wearing Vapor Flies.
I didn't see a ton. It were Vapors, instead. And I didn't see a ton.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. And maybe it was just because I was looking in the wrong places, because Hehir was in Adidas and Andrade was in Saucony and Hall was in Asics. But it doesn't. To me, people seemed not okay with the Vapor Flies. They still were going to be up in arms about them, but it was the Alpha Flies, because they're even higher, that seemed to be the bridge that people were not willing to cross anymore. Like when that picture came out of Kipchoge before Vienna, people were like, "Oh, this is bad. This is it. This is horrible." And I don't know. People aren't running in them as much. I don't know. It's just because they don't find them as comfortable or what. But I don't know if that's part of it. But I think more. I think you're right. The times are fast, but they're not eye popping.
Yeah, D'Amato was in Vaporflies, but not. There wasn't. I don't know what the situation was with Alpha Flies, because a lot of people like them. I don't know why they weren't more prevalent in this race, but maybe there were and we just missed them. I'm not sure, but we'll see. Is this the end of the Alpha
investigative report?
Yeah.
Did Alpha Flies make themselves obsolete? My column. Check it out. I mean, the Adidas shoe is getting a lot of pub. I'll just say this. I mean, it did really good. It did good in Valencia, and then Hehir won in them. So, and it's not like Hehir was gonna, it's not like he was the favorite in this race going in. So, some good pub there for them. All right, we'll leave it there. FloTrack podcast at gmail.com. That is the Marathon Project recap, the last big race of 2020. We will be back tomorrow, where we will begin our end of the year in review. Thank you to Alon for producing. Thank you to you, Lincoln, from the Woodshed, for joining me. We'll talk to you guys tomorrow.